I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening today. Coming up, Senate Majority Leader John Thune will join us today. Dylan Rothman from National Review. Mary Catherine Ham from Getting Hammered. A lot of guests, a lot of news. Like yesterday, the big news story of today came from Israel, taking out yet another senior leader in Iran. This time the head of intelligence was killed overnight. And then later in the day, Israel and the United States jointly destroyed the South Pars offshore processing facility, which is where all of Iran's natural gas for domestic use comes from. So going after the energy infrastructure that serves Iran's domestic economy is crippling their ability to fight back in this war. Strait of Hormuz remains closed, or at least down significantly, so the ships don't want to go through it. Give it time. We are winning. We are winning big. More on that coming up. Let me begin, though. We have a great sponsor, Americans for Prosperity, and they have produced for you a 250toolkit.com. Now, when you go there, I want you to go to a 250toolkit.com/Hugh. In March of 1775, at St. John's Church in Richmond, Patrick Henry rose to speak the words that spurred the American Revolution. They echo throughout American history. Give me liberty or give me death. You know that. As we celebrate America's 250th anniversary, never been more important to reflect on our nation's values, commit ourselves to move our country forward. My friends and sponsor over at Americans for Prosperity have created a terrific way to celebrate this historic year through their One Small Step initiative. It's a campaign built on a simple idea. Liberty requires courage, conviction, and an active citizenry. An active citizenry. For 250 years, Americans have preserved liberty through small, deliberate steps. Now it's on us, in the face of tremendous opposition to our founding ideals all over the place, to ensure these freedoms pass to the next generation. If you believe freedom is worth defending, and I do, then please go and visit a250toolkit.com/Hugh. Add your voice for liberty. That's a250toolkit.com/Hugh. a250toolkit.com/Hugh. What does the American people think of the war? I don't know, but I know what Republicans think of it. Here's Harry Enton on CNN reporting the latest numbers from the CNN poll of the American people. I'm not sure what number it is.
And this is one of those, because just take a look here. MAGA GOP view of Trump. Approve 100%. 100%. If you are a member of MAGA in the GOP, you approve of Donald John Trump. 0% say that they disapprove. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know you can't go higher than 100%. He is the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Now, there are some Republicans who disapprove of Donald John Trump, but they are not members of the Make America Great Again movement. The bottom line is this. If you are a member of MAGA, you approve.
I got to explain this for the Steelers fans. They heard the Dolphins mentioned. Now they think Trump plays for the Dolphins. No, the Dolphins were undefeated in that year. 100% approval within the GOP means the mythical break in the GOP is a myth. It's a convenience of podcasters and cranks. Forget about it. The party's behind Trump and they're behind this war. Here's Ben Talabou, who is my guest on Monday on ABC News last night, talking about how to retake the Strait of Hormuz, cut number one.
There's a lot of metrics that can be put behind that, whether that's the diminishing number of launchers that the Islamic Republic has or can repair, whether that's the rate of fire of its short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles and drones, whether that's the number of ships available both to its conventional Navy as well as to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, as well as to, real strikes delivered against the beating heart of its ballistic missile defense production and defense industrial base. So the regime has suffered blows due to against its military capability and capacity by the United States and Israel here. So there is a real defanging mission underway. But right now, the path to military victory for the Trump administration is likely not going to be on land. It's going to be on sea, or at sea, I should say. And that path goes through the Strait of Hormuz and in the Persian Gulf.
Speaking of the Strait, let's talk about that. What do you make of Iran's strategy right now and its ability to continue to strike multiple countries and keep control of the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, the regime is certainly widening the war, and this was something they telegraphed. They said that they would be trying to distribute the pain to the neighborhood, and that they said if they can export oil, no one can export oil. Ultimately, however, the regime has lost in the Strait of Hormuz before, not a decade ago, but actually 3 decades ago. Late in the Reagan administration, they tried to actually mine, they tried to actually target civilian tankers, and it paid a very heavy price for that. And that's actually what brought the U.S. into the region in a big way and led to the creation of CENTCOM in that part of the world. So if the Islamic Republic thinks it's going to draw on history to be able to punch back at America or America's partners in the region, well, it's going to have to look and learn from those lessons of history, which I'm sure, by the way, the U.S. has learned and currently seems to be eager to try to repeat and remind the Iranians of.
At this
Let
point,
me break in, and there's another story underway today. Rand Paul chairing hearings into the confirmation of Mark Wayne Mullen to be the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. Here is Chairman Paul just lashing into Mark Wayne Mullen. They don't like each other. Cut number 9.
Funding for refugee welfare programs. Instead of explaining your vote to continue these welfare programs for refugees, you decided to transfer the blame. You told the media that I was a freaking snake and that you completely understood why I had been assaulted. I was shocked that you would justify and celebrate this violent assault that caused me so much pain and my family so much pain. I just wonder if someone who applauds violence against their political opponents is the right person to lead an agency that has struggled to accept limits to the proper use of force. You might argue you were mad and upset about being confronted by your constituents. But Senator Mullen, your constituents are justifiably upset with you. By now, most of America knows that the Somali welfare fraud in Minnesota stole over $9 billion. But instead of defending your vote, you took to continue the vote to continue these refugee welfare programs. You chose to lash out at me. You went on to brag that you'd already told me to my face that you completely understood and approved of the assault. Well, that's a lie. You got a chance today. You can either continue to lie or you can correct the record. You have never had the courage to look me in the eye and tell me that the assault was justified. So today you'll have your chance. Today I'll give you that chance to clear the record. Tell it to my face. If that's what you believe, tell it to me today. Tell the world why you believe I deserve to be assaulted from behind, have 6 ribs broken, and a damaged lung. Tell me to my face why you think I deserved it.
I don't think Senator Paul is making good use of his time. Here's Senator Mark Wayne Mullen talking about something that interests America, sanctuary cities and their end, cut number 12.
Sir, it's been a difficult conversation that's been had with these sanctuary cities. As I said going on, we don't get to choose which laws we enforce. As elected officials, you shouldn't.
Let me go back and play his response. I got the wrong one. Cut number 10 is response to Senator Paul.
Chairman made, calling me a liar. Sir, I think everybody in this room knows that I'm very blunt and direct to the point. And if I have something to say, I'll say it directly to your face. If you recall, back in my House days, we actually did have this conversation because of the remarks that I've made. You were in a room. I simply addressed that I said I could understand because of the behavior you were having, that I could understand why the neighbor did what he did. As far as my terms as a snake in the grass, sir, I work around this room to try to fix problems. I've worked with many people in this room. Seems like you fight Republicans more than you work with us. I did address those remarks. I did explain your gimmicks by the amendment you put forth. And as far as me saying that I invoke violence, I don't. I don't think anybody should be hit by surprise. I don't like that. But if I do have something to say, everybody in this room knows I'll come straight to you. I'll say it publicly and I'll say it privately, but I'll never say it behind your back. So for you to say, I'm a liar, sir, that's not accurate. And I got proof to say that because you have spent millions of dollars in my campaigns against me because we just don't get along. However, sir, that doesn't keep me at all from doing my job. I can have different opinions with everybody in this room, but as Secretary of Homeland, I'll be protecting everybody, including Kentucky, as much as I will my own backyard in Oklahoma. It's bigger than the partisan bickering that we have. It's bigger than the political differences we have. The truth is, I have a job to do, and I don't like to fail at anything, at all. So I can set it aside if you're willing to set it aside. Let me earn your respect. Let me earn.
That was a pretty good exchange and a good response. I don't think Senator Paul is going to be voting for him, but John Fetterman is going to vote for him. He's going to get out of committee. He's going to be the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. Don't go anywhere. Noah Rothman joins me next to talk about the war in detail and why the American media wants to lose it. At least it seems that way. Joined by Noah C. Rothman, who you can follow on X at Noah C. Rothman, senior writer for National Review, participant often in the Editor's Podcast. Noah, I asked you to stick around extra today because I listened to the editors this week, and I love Rich, love Michael, Brendan Doherty, love Charles C.W. Cook. They've all been guests here frequently, but I don't think they dealt fairly with you in the last editors. Did you get enough time to state the case, in your opinion?
Well, I think I got plenty of time. My colleagues are more skeptical of the campaign than I am, and for reasons that are perfectly well reasoned and legitimate and prudent. I wouldn't question any of their motives. I think they're sound and their skepticism
they're wrong.
is justified.
I don't question their motives. They're wrong.
I argue that as well.
So
I argue that.
I want to give you a lot of runway. Explain how you see the war.
Well, listen, and as I said on the show, if you were to gauge it, I gauge it in two different ways: tactically and strategically. Tactically, this is one of the most impressive military campaigns in the history of the human race, which is not an exaggeration. The degree to which we're taking out a top 20 military power on the planet Earth. This is interstate conflict. This is not the sort of war that we're used to in the post 9/11 world. We're fighting a state power, and we are doing so with incredible success. Everything is relative. And in relative terms, we've been gaming out this war with Iran for 25 years, longer. And those war games produced catastrophic results. In the world before October 7th, 2023, Iran was capable of shutting down the strait within the first week and shutting down the strait to its own traffic as well, mining the strait as it did in the 1980s, threatening shipping with really scary anti-ship missiles, drones, ballistic missiles, etc. The prospects were for a major campaign, a ground war, with up to 1 million troops, men at arms, occupying the entire country, Iranian cities leveled, huge refugee crisis across the region, instability throughout the region, up to 1 million dead on both sides of the conflict. You can go check this out, to say nothing of oil prices, which were expected to skyrocket $200, $300 a barrel within the first week, as recently as 2019. Everything changed after October 7th. Israel spent the last 3 years methodically dismantling Iran's proxy terrorist network, which were to pose a real threat in an existential war. We were expecting that Iranian terrorist cells, active and passive, would be activated in North America, in Latin America, in Europe, and would target soft targets. And that threat has not entirely abated, to my knowledge. I wouldn't say that the threat is completely gone, but it was much more grave, a menace to Israel, to American troops in the region, and Syria and Iraq, etc. And what we're experiencing instead is total air superiority verging on air supremacy, the destruction of the Iranian Navy, the entire Navy, the elimination almost of Iran's capacity to fire long-range ballistic missiles, short-range ballistic missiles. We're attenuating its drone capacity. We're striking really hard now at these depots and factories that allow Iran to manufacture the munitions that would have shielded its nuclear program and possibly denied us area access to the entire Middle East in the event of if we didn't act. And we have experienced 3 U.S. soldiers killed by enemy fire, 6 rather, U.S. soldiers killed by enemy fire, each of which is a tragedy, each of which is an atrocity, you could argue, I would argue, and definitely something to mourn. But again, if we are going to look at this campaign and say we've sustained 3 fatalities due to enemy fire and that's unacceptable, I just don't understand where you're coming from. What metrics are you using to evaluate that? What historical benchmarks are you grading this against? I just feel like it's an impossible standard to hold the United States to, that the enemy can't be allowed to fire a successful shot. That's just an unrealistic standard to hold any country engaged in a real war, and this is a real war.
Some numbers. 10 Israelis have been killed, 13 American servicemen, 6 in combat, 7 as a result of an air catastrophe that was not caused by the enemy or by friendly fire. We've lost a couple of jets to friendly fire in Kuwait. A number of our United Arab Emirates and Qatari and Saudi Arabian facilities have been hit today. Amit Segal reported just minutes ago, the state of Qatar expresses its strong and unequivocal condemnation of the brutal Iranian attack on the industrial city of Ras Laffan, which caused fire, significant damage to the facility. Qatar views this attack as a dangerous escalation and a blatant violation of its sovereignty, as well as a direct threat to its national security and to the stability of the region. Meanwhile, Israel and the United States took out the largest facility, seaborne facility, for the production of domestic use natural gas in Iran. So the war is widening to the Iranian infrastructure, and overnight, Israel took out like number 3 and number 5 on the list of the top 10 people in Iran. Every morning I open up the Times of Israel, Noah, and they've gotten 2 or 3 more of the baddies. I don't know anyone could describe this as other than a overwhelming success with the tragic cost of life. That's how it is to be described.
Yeah, and when I say this stuff, like, I'm accused of being Pollyanna-ish about this campaign because there are downsides, and I don't want to minimize those. But again, the Iranian campaign to extend the pain of this war to Gulf states is part of the playbook, and the playbook suggested that Iran would execute something like the 2019 Aramco attack. Remember that? The attack on the Saudi petroleum processing facility, the largest on the planet Earth. That was a strategic assault. It involved multiple drones hitting very specific targets designed to affect international oil prices. We're not seeing anything nearly that coordinated. And the reason we're not seeing anything nearly that coordinated is because our technological and intelligence capacities shared with Israel have evolved to the point where strikes on leadership targets, pinpoint strikes on individuals, the sort of thing that we could only fantasize about in 2003 when we attempted to open that war with a decapitation strike and failed. That's usually what happens. Very hard to pull off.
People forget
Instead,
that. We went early in 2003 because we thought we knew where Saddam was, and we didn't get Saddam for months. For months he hid out. And, of course, the deck of cards. We never fully decapitated the regime. This is a different kind of war. But no, I want to
we've eliminated 49 of Khamenei's top associates, including the head of his intelligence services, his security chief, the guy who was running the war. And we're peeling back the layers of this regime, which is contributing, to instability in the regime. The command and control structure is gone. We're seeing people, individual IRGC commanders, act autonomously, which minimizes the amount of damage they can do. And second, you peel back these layers, you get to people who are maybe less loyal to the regime, who maybe prioritize their own survival and their family's survival, who maybe want to talk to us. These are all strategic objectives.
Have you seen the reports of members of the Basij and a few IRGC refusing to report for work or deserting?
I have not. But Hugh, and I said this on the commentary podcast today, it was really curious to me to hear Benjamin Netanyahu say yesterday, Iranian people, go out and celebrate Nowruz. We got your back. We're in the sky. We're watching you. Go celebrate. Enjoy your lives. I didn't expect that to happen for a couple of weeks. He's not saying go engage in insurrection violence, but he is saying go outside.
Yeah, he is. And I was taken aback by that as well. We may play that for you. Don't go anywhere, America, because Noah Rothman is probably, occasionally I like to talk to pundits who agree with me. Noah and I might be the most simpatico views of the war. I think the world is so much better off. We got to talk about the strategery involved as well. China cannot be liking any of this. And we got to talk about American public opinion. Noah, I have described this as a battle within Cold War II. Cold War II, of course, is the United States and China. But the battle here has 3 parts: Venezuela, Cuba, and, of course, Iran. If you're China, how do you view the developments of the last 15 months of Donald Trump's presidency?
Well, they haven't been great. If you've predicated your geopolitical strategy on developing and leaning on as many of the anti-American powers as you could, and again, as of October 6, 2023, they consisted roughly of Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and you could say Nicaragua perhaps, but on the edges of that sort of thing. And we've seen a significant attenuation of the anti-American axis over the course of, I would say, the end of Joe Biden's presidency, although no thanks to him, in part because Israel took its destiny into its own hands. But the Trump administration has pretty much taken Venezuela off the board for now. I don't love that the regime is still in place, and it still has the very same character of the regime that Hugo Chavez established in 1999, but they're playing ball, and the oil exports that were gifted to Cuba or have been cut off. China can no longer rely on them either. That's strategically valuable. And Iran is China's gas pump. Now, China's insulated itself from fuel shocks, to my understanding. They've electrified a lot of their civilian automotive fleet, and they have significant stockpiles in anticipation of this very scenario. But it's going to hurt, and they're going to rely ever more on Russia. Now, strategically, the thinking, as I understand it, among those who do this kind of thinking, is that it is in our interests to do something like the opposite of the Sino-Soviet split, like a reverse Kissingerian approach to the dynamics between China and Russia. Rather than split them, we want to bind them together. We want their fates intertwined, because Russia is a declining power. It is a power embroiled in a war it cannot win. It is a gas station that has a nuclear weapons facility attached to it, as I believe Lindsey Graham used to say. And China is a rising power, but it's got plenty of internal problems on its own. And it is confronting now something that it hasn't seen in a long time, which is a demonstration of American state power. We're seeing a lot of commentary about how exquisite ordnance is being depleted, and that's a problem because we can't replace it as fast as we're using it, specifically missile interceptors, but also a variety of other high-end missiles, long-range weapons, standoff munitions. But that's got to be mitigated by the fact that we have demonstrated the will to use them in a sustained way, in a strategic way, and in a very impressive way. I mean, that's the sort of thing that puts the fear of God into you. There's something that people who observe foreign policy just kind of dismiss, and that is elementary human psychology. Like, I don't begrudge, this is where we're going to disagree, Hugh. I don't begrudge European powers that have been treated like garbage by this administration for months and saying, well, now you need us and look where it's going to get you. That's elementary human psychology. So too is the human psychology of seeing the United States decimate a rogue but not insubstantial military power in Iran with the quickness, with relative ease, and demonstrate the will to continue that fight to fruition, to an end game. That is shaping the thinking in Beijing. That is changing their considerations. It may not change the considerations for the better, by the way. They may perceive that they have a window of opportunity.
No, we
to
do
act
disagree.
that's closing fast.
I expect European leaders to act in their national interest. Palmerston said that we have no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests. So I expect them to look past insults, behavior that they don't consider to be reciprocal, all of that to the fact that they wanted one thing from America, arms for Ukraine, which we sold them. We didn't give it to them. They haven't spent 5%, much less 2% for decades. They have been a free rider. And I've been okay with that. I'm like Lindsey Graham, we need Europe. But this is not the time to exercise your peak. This is the time to do something symbolic, because they have, the British Navy's down to 27 ships, I think. They're not really a superpower. They've got some nukes. France is crippled by internal divisions that make our look like paper mache. The people we can rely on are the Poles, the Ukraines, the Finns, the Swedes, and they can't really give us anything. They're involved in a war. So the people who are loser here is Great Britain and France. You get a minute to the break. Then we'll come back and talk about America.
Yeah, sure. Listen, there's nothing I disagree with there, and it would be very valuable for us to have these ships to help escort missions when it's time to do those escort missions, which is not now. Now is the time to sequentially degrade Iran's capacity to project power in the Persian Gulf, and then we demonstrate that the Persian Gulf is clear. Everything's going to happen in a sequential order, but we're going to have to agree to disagree. Yes, I understand. I believe it's cutting off your nose to spite your face to react as they have reacted. Do I blame them? Do I think that they don't have any motive or impetus for acting that way? No, I get it.
Oh, that's fine. Then we don't disagree. We just think they ought to be. I think they ought to be more mature. So do you, but you're more understanding of them. I say, great nations don't need psychologists. No, I want you to listen to Harry Enton on CNN last night talk about the state of American public opinion, beginning with Republicans and Trump. Then we'll come back and get your thoughts on how this might feed into November. Here's Harry Enton.
This is one
on
of those,
CNN.
because just take a look here. MAGA GOP view of Trump. Approve 100%. 100%. If you are a member of MAGA and the GOP, you approve of Donald John Trump. 0% say that they disapprove. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know you can't go higher than 100%. He is the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Now, there are some Republicans who disapprove of Donald John Trump, but they are not members of the Make America Great Again movement. The bottom line is this: if you are a member of MAGA, you approve of Donald Trump.
It's interesting, though, because there have been a couple prominent people who have sort of come out online, and they're very mad about this war with Iran because he promised no new wars. Is there any sign that people might be leaving MAGA relative to 2024?
Yeah, okay. So, I've said it before, and, the theme of this segment is Tucker Carlson be darned. And when we look at the numbers, I've heard some people say, oh, you know what, when you look at those MAGA numbers, it doesn't account for those who might have left MAGA. But take a look here. Americans who identify as MAGA, in November of 2024, it was 28% of Americans. Now it's basically the same. If anything, it's slightly higher at 30%. The bottom line is this: the MAGA base within the GOP is not shrinking. It's the same size. If anything, it is slightly larger than it was back in 2024 when, of course, Donald Trump won a second term. So that 100% that Donald Trump has approval among MAGA GOP, that is not an artifact of MAGA shrinking. It's just an indication of how strong Donald Trump's grip is on that MAGA base.
And so I guess it begs the question of what's happening with inside the GOP and if there are any splits there, because with those kind of numbers, they're going to want to retain that, right? So they can retain their seats.
Yes. And you know what we're talking about? We mentioned Iran in the intro of this segment. GOP on U.S. military action in Iran. Look at this. In MAGA, it's 90% approval. It's 90% approval, just 5% disapproval. If you disapprove of the job that Donald Trump is doing, the U.S. military action in Iran, and you're a member of the GOP, look at this. It's your non-MAGA. You're not MAGA. It's 36% there, 54% approve. But the majority of Republicans approve of the job that the U.S. military action is in Iran, and the majority of MAGA, which is the majority of the GOP, very much approve, 90%. Very little split.
No, you are not MAGA. I am not MAGA. I'm a Reagan conservative. I don't know how you describe yourself. What do you make of? I think Harry is a pretty good pollster, and I think it's an honestly presented set of numbers. What do you make of them?
It comports with what I've been seeing in the polling, and it's important to distinguish self-described MAGA voters versus self-described Republican voters, because self-described MAGA voters express a higher approval rating of the president overall, to say nothing of the Iran war specific, whereas Republican voters take a more nuanced view. And I've seen numbers that are higher than 64% among Republicans who support this war. Depends on the poll you go to. I've seen mid-70s. I've seen low 80s. You have to remember that it's not like Donald Trump came out of nowhere and said, we should be hostile and confrontational with Iran. This has been baked into the Republican DNA, Republican voters' DNA, since the inception of the Islamic Republic 47 years ago, including Donald Trump himself, who was one of the most outspoken expostulators of a view that we should be much more aggressive towards Iran as early as 1980, and has been consistent in that view throughout his career in public life. So this is not something that the president really has to sell to Republicans. It's a different story when you're talking about the rest of the electorate. And we can get really deep and granular with this thing. Like, for example, YouGov has a survey out today which indicates that while 17% of self-described Republicans, not MAGA, just Republicans, express dissatisfaction with Trump's job approval, a full third, 33%, are disapproving of the president when it comes to gas prices. And gas prices are ineluctably linked with the instability in the Persian Gulf, and therefore an expression of disapproval in the war. You could really go granular with this thing if you wanted to. But I think that does kind of miss the mark, because while these voters are expressing dissatisfaction with their own personal finances, and that dissatisfaction could and probably will result in less enthusiasm to go to the polls in November, especially if these conditions persist. I doubt they will, but if we were in stasis between now and November, that would mute enthusiasm to vote for Republican candidates at the polls. But I think it just misses the point, because we're not talking about November's elections. We're not talking about the price of gas between now and July. We're talking about an epochal confrontation with an immortal American enemy. And on the other side of this thing, could be a lot of benefits that Americans will perceive and don't even understand they're paying now. Nobody has any idea how much resources we devote, how much time it takes, how many U.S. service personnel and civilian public servants alike devote to containing the threat from Iran. These people work day and night to kill our servicemen, to kill our public servants, to frustrate our interests in the world. We've just gotten really good at interdicting it, but they never stop. They do not sleep. This is what they do. And if on the other side of a world without the Islamic Republic, where we finally get to engineer the pivot to Asia that we've always wanted to engineer, we can contain Russia in Europe. We know how to do that. NATO allies are very good at doing that. What we can't do is extricate ourselves from the Middle East as long as the Islamic Republic exists. And if we could, that would be an epochal strategic shift for the United States and very bad news for our enemies.
And that is, my view is that every Republican running for re-election ought to learn the speech that Noah just gave off the cuff and say it again and again and again, because I think it's a winning issue if the war is won. Last minute to you, Noah. If you're a Republican candidate, what do you say right now about the war right now?
Well, listen, I would say that and you're talking about politics, right? As a candidate, an appeal to voters. Yeah, I would say that, listen, my political career is important to me. And I think that I'm valuable to you as your constituents. You matter to me, and I want to serve you best. And I'm trying to do that now. And what I'm going to do is put my political interests aside in favor of the American national interest. These people are our enemies. They want to kill us. They have killed us. It is far more important to me to be of service to you and of service to the history of this country than it is for us to argue about who should control the next budgeting process in Congress, who should control committee chairs. That doesn't matter to me nearly as much as the safety of you and your children, and that's what I'm here to protect.
Bingo! Noah Rothman, campaign consultant extraordinaire, except he's not. He's a senior writer at NRO. Follow him on X at Noah C. Rothman. Thank you for the extra time today, Noah. Britt Hume, Dean of American Political Reporters, had some choice words on the war with Martha McCollum earlier today.
Britt, here's a bit of the reaction. Here's a combination of some voices on that put together. Watch this.
It's becoming clear all the time, frankly, that the Trump administration was not prepared for this war to last.
Now, are we any closer to finding out what the plan is here?
Here we find ourselves again in a situation where we could actually win every single battle and still lose the war.
So this is also sort of classic, Britt. You could go back, I guess, to Vietnam and talk about how wars are covered and whether or not it's accurate or inaccurate in terms of the picture that people are getting across the country. What's your take?
Well, for a moment, Martha, let's turn the situation around and assume a situation in which the United States is under attack from a major enemy. And that enemy is ranging freely over our skies with no resistance, bombing at will, sending missiles at will, attacking our vessels, attacking our ballistic missile systems, attacking our aircraft at will. That they have wiped out, they've killed the president and wiped out his cabinet, and countless officials in the echelons below. And we have responded as the United States by shutting off a major waterway that we need for our economy. Yes, it harms other economies as well. Do you think anyone would be saying that this is, as Walter Russell Mead put it today, a stalemate? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So it's absurd. Let me remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Take my Relief Factor every day. I went to the front door today, all ready to go out and do my trundling. Opened the door, it was 24 degrees. Closed the door, came back in and read. But I still take my Relief Factor. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see me do it every day at this time. A little raspberry lime seltzer. And the 4 pills I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega go down easy, feel great. And you know what? No minor aches and pains that come from not exercising or exercising. It doesn't matter. I'm getting older. So you get aches and pains, you get older, not me. Relief Factor works. Give it a try. The starter pack, 3-week supply, 1-800-4 and the word relief for $19.95. 1-800-4-RELIEF or go to their website at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. And please remember, hundreds of you have given, thousands actually, to Food for the Poor. It's Lent. Every year I ask people during Lent if they observe, even if they don't. Think of the lost and the least in the Caribbean, all the islands in Central America, the islands of Guatemala, Costa Rica. They haven't got clean water. They don't have enough food. Food for the Poor feeds the lost and the least. For $50 contribution, tax deductible, you can get clean water to 2 kids for an entire year. All you have to do is make that donation at the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. That banner says Give Living Water, or call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Thank you in advance for your generosity. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, and if you've been watching C-SPAN for the last day and today, you've seen Republicans standing up demanding voter ID and citizenship before they vote in federal elections, and they're pummeling the Democrats because of the way that Majority Leader John Thune set this up. The leader joins me now. Leader Thune, welcome. Well played, Mr. Bond. If this was a fight, they'd stop it. The Democrats could. Are they going to?
We'll find out here soon enough, Hugh. I think that one thing that this is a Save America Act is a package of just common sense policies that should get an automatic yes, literally from every member of the Senate. And the core of it, as you know, is a requirement for Americans to demonstrate that they're eligible to vote and that they are who they say they are when they go to do so. And requiring a photo ID for a whole lot of things in this country is something that, Americans expect. You would think that they'd be able to produce one to vote in our election. So I think on the substance, it's a winner. We just have to do everything we can to make sure that we're pounding them and over the course of the next week or two, and then we'll see where the votes are.
Well, I enjoy tuning in when I can, and whenever I want to break from using my voice, I just turn on C-SPAN because we're winning. So well played, well played. Is there any idea of how long they'll put up with this? Is there any way they can stop it? Democrats, I mean.
Not really. I mean, what we did, we called up the House-passed version, and typically to get a bill up on the floor in the Senate takes procedurally what we call cloture on the motion to proceed, which is a 60-vote threshold in the Senate. Because this came over in the form of a message from the House, it was at 51. So we were able to get on it, and then I filled the amendment tree, which prevents the Democrats from getting some of the amendment votes on some of the crazy ideas they have. So it keeps it more, gives us more control, I guess I would say, of the floor and what ultimately we end up voting on. But again, we'll see how long it goes. I think that we need to have a sufficient amount of time, obviously, to make the case and get this issue in front of the American people and hold the Democrats accountable.
So, Leader Thune, if Chuck Schumer had a brainstorm, which would be rare, but it not impossible, and decided, I'll offer to reopen DHS. We'll vote on the appropriation bill if they'll stop pummeling us. Would you take that deal?
I will say that would be, that's a good question. I think that'd be it might be an off-ramp for the Democrats, honestly. And we've got to get DHS opened up. And, we've got 120,000 people at DHS who've started missing paychecks, and many of those, of course, work with TSA or other agencies that are crucial for national security. If they were willing to make a deal on that, we might be willing to negotiate. But
take the TKO, Senator. Yesterday, one of your colleagues I talked to was about to go through to a TSA line, and this senator had been patted down on their way home. I'll bet you a lot of senators are getting patted down unnecessarily right now because they can't be very happy. But I think about the Coast Guard and the counterterrorism people. This is nuts. This is really nuts in the middle of a war.
It is. And, it's the second time they've done this, Hugh, and this is especially troubling because we are in the middle. It's a dangerous world. We've got cyber threats, and the cyber office is located within the Department of Homeland Security, so that's also affected by this appropriation bill. And it makes you wonder what is on their minds. I mean, I think they have become so obsessed with, I'm told there's another No Kings rally out here in the next week or two that Democrats are, that happened last fall and slowed down negotiations on ending that government shutdown. They are held so hostage by the far left in the country right now and are so infected with Trump derangement syndrome and blind hatred of the president that they don't want to do anything obviously, that gives him a victory. And this isn't. The White House has been very willing to negotiate. I mean, I don't know how close you've been following the back and forth on this, but they really on ICE and DHS, or I should say Customs and Border Patrol, the two things right now the Democrats have held hostage. That to me is a defund the police, defund law enforcement position that they've taken, in spite of the fact that the administration has made numerous efforts to engage with the Democrats on some of the issues they care about in ways that I think the Democrats ought to be willing to accept. I mean, this is about politics, nothing more, nothing less for them.
You know, Leader, I did not know we had another No King spectacle coming. I have heard the president called an authoritarian by Ben Rhodes, and because of Venezuela and Cuba and Iran, and the fascist talk is out there. You know what? I say to them, Supreme Court ruled against the thing that matters most to him, the tariffs, and they said you can't do it, and he didn't arrest him. You know, it's the least authoritarian thing in the world is to abide by the ruling of the people who rule against the thing you want the most. And so they're just silly. Let's turn to the war. 5 minutes ago, Nadav Eyal, a very good reporter out of Israel, posted, the IDF confirmed it has struck the Iranian naval fleet in the Caspian Sea. The fleet had been used during the war in Ukraine to transfer equipment from Iran to Russia. I think the Iranians are getting pummeled, and they don't know how to surrender.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, and I think the president clearly understands the importance of reopening the strait, whether it's done the easy way or the hard way. But, you know, operations have been going on now for less than 3 weeks, and thousands of sorties have taken place against their missile launchers, their ballistic missiles. I just think the administration, our military leadership, our war planners have done a great job of just taking completely away from the Iranians their ability to threaten the region. And I think that's what this was all about. So, I mean, we need to finish the job. Hopefully that'll be done soon. But I think every day we achieve more of our objectives in defanging the Iranian regime.
I'm very glad that Senator Collins and our colleagues got the defense appropriations bill through. Is a supplemental necessary? And if so, can reconciliation be used to move it?
Could be. It's an option, obviously, that we'll keep available to us. And honestly, in both defense and homeland security, if they continue, I think we got to do what we can and make sure we're doing everything we can to defend the country and the homeland. And the Democrats seem very unwilling to do that. But so if a supplemental is necessary, we'll obviously entertain it. The White House sends it up. We did, as you know, put a significant amount of funding last summer in the Working Families Tax Cuts bill for defense, but obviously this costs money, and we need to make sure that we keep our munitions built up, so that the deterrence is always the best thing that we can do as a country. If you want to deter bad behavior around the world, it's not, as it's always been said, that it's not our strength that tempts our adversaries; it's our weakness, and I think that's why we've got to make sure that we're sufficiently funding our readiness in a way that deters bad behavior.
You know, Leader, I'm old enough to remember Grenada, and I'm old enough to remember Panama and 1991, and then, of course, 2001 Afghanistan, 2003 March to Baghdad. Every time our troops do something big, I'm always amazed at the iterations. I mean, triple generation jumps in weaponry, accuracy, lethality. Do you sit around the Senate conference room and look at each other and say, how do they do this?
You kind of do. I mean, you look at the operations that have been conducted just in this past, the time frame here, starting with the B-2 bombing run in Iran earlier this year, Venezuela. This operation, it is remarkable how good these people are, and it makes you grateful as a nation that there are young men and women who want to serve their country and have the skill, the expertise, the experience, and the determination to keep the country safe. And I think we've seen that in so many ways just in the last few months.
All right, last question, Senator Thune. Everyone always assumes the Republicans get along. They've never been to a conference meeting. And now they've seen Senator Paul and Senator Mullen kind of come into verbal blows today. Does Senator Mullen have the votes to get confirmed? Because we need him confirmed quickly. We do, and I'm hoping he'll be voted out of the committee tomorrow. I think that'll be the case, and then we'll get him up on the floor early next week. We got to fill that position, and he's the right person for it. And yes, there are some. It got a little spicy, and there's some personal history that those two have. But at the end of the day, it's about the job, and
it's an important job, and I think Senator Mullen's the right person to fill it.
Yeah, I always say a little sparky is fun, lights up the night. So, Majority Leader Thune, thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Leader. Good luck with the ongoing debate on the Save America Act. I appreciate that you've got it to the floor and the debate is underway. Thank you, Senator.
Indeed. Thank you, Hugh.
Let me remind everyone that while the Senate is working, they're not spending your money, so you might want to save some money. We have a great sponsor that can do that, Consumer Cellular. Go to consumercellular.com/Hugh or call 1-800-411-4454. Remember, my code is Hugh. 1-800-411-4454. My name is Hugh. My code is Hugh. If you use my code Hugh, you get your second month free when you make the switch. And if you go to consumercellular.com/Hugh, you'll go to the website, but remember, the code is still Hugh. And remember, if you're over 50, pay particular attention, because they will give you 2 lines of unlimited data, no matter how much you stream, no matter how much you talk, no matter how much you're looking at the grandkid movies. If you're over 50, you get 2 lines of unlimited talk for $60 a month, and when you use my code Hugh, you get your second month free on that offer as well. Call and find out how much money Consumer Cellular can save you. Don't sacrifice service for savings. Get both. 1-800-411-4454. My code is Hugh. I'm waiting for more reporting on how many ships in the Iranian Navy were sunk in the Caspian Sea today by the IDF. Gosh, I almost feel bad for the regular Army and Navy of Iran. They didn't start this. They're crazy, fanatical, theological fanatics got this going. The IRGC is keeping it going. Most of their leaders are dead. Their generals are taking orders from people who are dead. And now the sailors out in the Caspian Sea, they're not even close to Iran, where the action is, Tehran and eastern Iran and the southern Iran near the Strait of Hormuz. And all of a sudden, they're dead because you don't screw with the Israelis. They can fly a long way. And they did. Stop shooting. Iran, lay down your weapons. Here is Vice President Vance speaking in Michigan today, cut number 2.
What is the administration doing to help keep gas prices down, and where do you see gas prices going here in the near future?
Well, the President of the United States has been crystal clear about this. Look, gas prices are up, and we know they're up, and we know that people are hurting because of it, and we're doing everything that we can to ensure that they stay lower. I will say, the President said this, and I certainly agree with it. This is a temporary blip. Okay, what happened under the Biden administration is that gas prices were high for 4 years. Gas prices are higher right now, and frankly, they're not even as high as they were during certain parts of the Biden administration because of what's going on in the Middle East. It's not going to last forever. We're going to take care of business. We're going to come back home, and when that happens, you're going to see energy prices come back down to reality. But in the meantime,
okay, he continued cut number 2, talked about the resignation yesterday of Joe
3
Kent,
weeks ago.
who turned out to be a
Joe,
little bit of an outlier in terms of Republican support for Israel, which is almost uniform. Cut number 3.
3 weeks ago. Now, you asked about Joe Kent. Now, I know Joe Kent a little bit. I like Joe Kent. You heard the President of the United States say yesterday that he likes Joe Kent, too. But it's one thing to have a disagreement of opinion. I know the President very well. He welcomes differences of opinion. He likes it when people express their views about what should happen. He listens to everybody. It's one of the great things I like about him is that whether you're the gardener at Mar-a-Lago or whether you're the Secretary of the State, the President cares about what you think about an issue. He recognizes that everybody has smarts and everybody has wisdom. That said, whatever your view is, when the President of the United States makes a decision, it's your job to help make that decision as effective and successful as possible. And so the President said this yesterday, if you are on the team and you can't help implement the decisions of his administration, he has the right to make those decisions, then it's a good thing for you to resign. And I think that's exactly right. It's fine to disagree. But once the President makes a decision, it's up to everybody who serves in his administration to make it as successful as possible. That's how I do my job, and I think that's how everybody in the administration should do their job, too.
That is how an honest person does their job, unless they're the boss. If the boss says A, you do A. You might argue A. You want to do not A. But if the boss says A, you do what the boss says. Cut number 4 of the Vice President in Michigan.
about nationalizing elections in recent months himself. It's state.
Well, if what you mean by intervening in the election is that we want everybody to have a voter ID before voting in this country, yes, we should be doing that, to be clear. I mean, if by what you mean is, Marco Rubio has like 5 jobs, is the president going to send Marco?
The vice president's very good on his feet. One more cut of the vice president talking about how it's going and how it's going to go. Cut number 5.
And what is really at stake in this election in November is fundamentally we've done so much good and we've built so much and we've been able to do a lot for the American people, but the Democrats threatened to take us straight back to where we were just a few short years ago. And we all know the economic statistics. We all know the fact that we felt it in our pockets, that everything from groceries to our home electricity bill was going up at a level that it hadn't gone up in 40 years under Joe Biden. But it's not just that. Because the American dream, my friends, as you all know, it's not just about going out and being able to buy something, as important as that is. It's not just about the economics, the dollars and cents, though of course we demand that our citizens become more prosperous. It's also about peace and security. It's about being safe in your own home. It's about what I think of as a classic American idea that just because you grew up in a poor family like mine doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to walk down the street in safety and security in your own country. And that is what Joe Biden and his leadership and Nancy Pelosi and all these clowns in Washington, that is the thing that they tried to take away the most from us. Where do you think the fentanyl that flooded our streets and killed hundreds of thousands of our citizens came from? It came from Joe Biden's wide open border. Where do you think the highest crime rates, the highest murder rates came from during that administration? They came from the fact that we went to war on the police rather than on the criminals who committed crimes. Where do you think the fact that we had elevated murder rates, not just in our big cities, but in our small towns, because we let in hundreds of thousands of violent criminals into the United States of America? So when I talk about the American dream, I mean, number one, that I want you to have a good job that pays you a good wage, that allows you to put food on the table, but also take a couple of nice vacations every year. But what I also mean is that we need to get the people who are making our cities less safe the hell out of our country and focus on American citizens first.
Good for the vice president. I mean that. He's making the case. I make the case every day for a relief factor, and I'm going to do it to you right now. Don't forget it. Now, I did not trundle today. I did my 5 on Monday and my 5 on Tuesday. But I opened the door today. I was ready to trundle. Thought I would do 4, maybe 6, depends on how I feel. Had a lot of time. And it was 24 degrees. Now, I don't know when that happened. It happened overnight. It was windy yesterday, but it was 50. And this is Virginia. The cherry blossoms are out, actually. Not for long. They'll be dead by the end of the weekend. 24 degrees. And I said, nope, I'm going to go back inside and read. So I did. But I still took my relief factor in hour number 1. You watched me do it on the Salem News Channel. I do it every day on the Salem News Channel. You can watch it or you can hear it on the Salem Radio Network, our great radio affiliates across the United States. The bag always sounds the same. I do it for one reason. I want to feel better the next day than I do today. That means exercise. That means getting rid of the minor aches and pains, not taking Aleve, not taking Advil, not taking ibuprofen, not even taking aspirin, because my doctor doesn't say take an aspirin a day. Some people do. I don't. I take Relief Factor, and I recommend it to you, 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or the starter pack, $19.95 at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Please remember as well, food for the poor. It's Lent. I beg my listeners, they're good people. If you're listening to the show, you're good folk. And I know it's tight, especially when gas is up a couple of bucks a gallon some places. Maybe you haven't got $50, or at least you don't think you do. But the sacrifice you make for food for the poor and the children that they serve is seen and remembered. That what you do for the least of these, you do for me. And you can make that contribution by calling 855-359-4673, 855-359-4673, or find the banner, Give Living Water, at the top of HughHewitt.com. The blue banner, not even a Steelers fan can miss it, at HughHewitt.com. It's at the top. Let it load. Marco Rubio had some stuff to say today about visas and people who want to come to the country. Let's go to cut number 6.
Our visa system, okay, who you allow to visit your country should reflect the national interest. We said that from the very beginning. It was one of the directives that we got from the president. It's one of the things he ran on. And so our visa process basically is, and there are some times we'll deny people visas because of activities they've undertaken overseas. Other times it's people that have visas but are in the United States doing things that run counter to our national interest. And the law gives us the right, and in fact, I would argue the obligation to remove people like that from our country. And we're going to continue to do it. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, sometimes somebody comes in and says, I want to come in as a student. They're here as a student, and then once they're here, they're involved in nefarious activity. We're going to remove them from the country. But maybe they're here as a researcher. Maybe they're here as, I don't want to say journalist because you guys will get upset, but, it could be anything. These are visitors to the country. A visa is a visitor. It's not a right. By the way, we deny visas every day all over the world. People will go to an embassy, they'll sit for an interview, and the consular officer will deny them a visa because of something that came up in the record, because of something that came up in their interview, whatever it may be. So if you have the power to deny someone a visa before they get one, you most certainly have the power to revoke it once they get one and then do something they shouldn't be doing. So there's a variety of reasons why visas are denied, but all of them are because it implicates our national interest or national security.
Common sense from the Secretary of State. John Ratcliffe, director of CIA, was on the Hill today. He got asked by Senator John Cornyn about whether or not Iran had malign intent to resume their nuclear weapons program. Cut number 7.
The head of the National Counterterrorism Center resigned, saying that Iran did not represent an imminent threat to the United States. Is there anything to indicate that Iran had ceased in its nuclear ambitions or in its desire to continue to build ballistic missiles capable of threatening American troops and allies in the Middle East?
Senator, no. In fact, the intelligence reflects the contrary.
So you disagree with Mr. Kent?
I do.
I would think any fair-minded assessment of the situation, even based on open sources, would reflect the danger the regime poses to the United States.
Amen, Senator Cornyn. Well said. General Jack Keane, go-to guy on Fox News, interviewed by Larry Kudlow on Fox Business today on one of the best case scenarios out there. Let's play that clip.
General Keane, I'm reading that there are 2 armies in Iran. One is the Revolutionary Guards, of course. I guess the number there is about 150,000. But there's a second army that we sometimes hear less about, the Islamic Republic of Iran Army. Artesh is what it's called. It has over 300,000 people. If the reporting is to be trusted, we've gone after, the U.S. and Israel and so forth have gone after the Revolutionary Guards, but we have not gone after this second army, the Artesh Army, which tends to be more, I don't know, could be equivalent, some kind of equivalent of a border control or homeland, whatever it is. But we haven't gone after them. I didn't know that. Is it true? And what do you think about that? How do you reckon that?
Well, here's why. 1, most of the draftees are in that army. 2, the leaders of that army are not the ideologues that are part of the IRGC, and they're not paid as well, but they're not ideologues either. And I know for a fact that we're talking to some of the leaders in that army as potential, if the regime is going to collapse, and certainly the Israelis are working on that full time to set conditions for a regime collapse. And if it's going to do that, CIA, Mossad, and talking to army leaders, they would likely be some of the people that may be willing to, 1, undermine the regime to further push it towards collapse, and 2, take over to help to stabilize the country. They're not the ideologues. They're not the diabolical killers. They're not going to open fire on the population. They see themselves as part of the population. That's all the draftees. That's why they've never asked them, Larry, to go out on the streets and fire on the people. And the reason is they're not sure they would. And that's the reality of it. Well, so, yes, it's an excellent point that you brought up here, one that our audience needs to know about. There is huge potential here with the leadership of that army, possibly breaking faith with the ideologues that are running the country.
We are 18 days into a war. We have no idea. It's cost 13 American families everything, the ultimate price. 10 Israelis dead. Double-digit service members seriously wounded, Americans. Lots of our allies in the Gulf killed. A lot of destruction around the area. But Iran is shattered. And at some point, you hope the colonels, I would guess the generals are ideological, but you hope the colonels, maybe the captains and the majors, say enough of this. They're going to come after us soon. Let's take to the streets. And let's take, we got weapons, they got bullets. Let's turn this around. Josh Kraushaar is editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider Daily Newsletter. Josh, before I go to any specifics, how do you think the war is going?
I mean, militarily, if you look at the objectives that both the U.S. and Israel set out at the beginning of the war, you really couldn't have asked for a whole lot more. The first 24 hours saw the killing of the Ayatollah and some of the top Iranian military officials. Israel, I know, certainly has had certain targets, the Basij headquarters, some of the checkpoints, some of the IRGC offices and leaders. So there's been a lot of military successes. I think the one thing that has been unclear, and we talked about this last week, Hugh, is there's been a mixed messaging from the U.S. and Israel, I think, a little bit on whether regime change is a goal and whether that's a reasonable expectation as a result of the military operation. There's also been, a lack, I think, of communication a little more on the U.S. side in terms of what the goals are. And I think President Trump lately has been talking about the war and its aims and the threat that it posed with its nuclear ambitions very clearly in the last few days. But that's been an issue. But in terms of the military successes, I think Israel's been very transparent about the accomplishments. The U.S. has been briefing on a daily basis, and I think militarily they've taken out a lot of the Iranian infrastructure, a lot of the top leadership, and it has been fairly significant to date.
Late-breaking reports have the IDF sinking at least 5 Iranian Navy ships in the Caspian Sea used for resupply of Russia. One of the Israeli journalists I follow closely is Nadav Eyal. I think he's sort of center-left. He writes in a piece called Larijani was the system, now he's gone. This paragraph. One senior figure told me, Nadav Eyal, imagine Israel waking up after weeks of war to find no military industry, no Rafael, no Israel aerospace industries, no R&D, no technological backbone for the regime left. That's the scale of damage we're inflicting. That's the campaign. Billions that they are losing each day, and that's Israel's insurance policy for the day after. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's consistent with what we've been hearing, certainly on the Israeli side, Hugh. We have a story in Jewish Insider about the lieutenant colonel who's been briefing the Israeli public, who said that Iran is now, as of right now, they're no longer able to produce ballistic missiles, which was one of the big goals in terms of both in terms of the goals of the war, getting rid of its ballistic missile stockpile and also the nuclear enrichment. And on the ballistic missile front, apparently they've declared success, at least on the Israeli side. You mentioned, there've been a lot of notable officials in recent days that have been taken out. The latest is the Iranian intelligence minister, Esmail Khatib, who the Israeli military said today that it had killed in an overnight airstrike. So, again, militarily, there are a lot of checks on the boxes of what the U.S. and Israel have been doing. I think the one big remaining question is regime. What is the timetable, and is regime change going to be the outcome of this pretty very deliberate military intervention?
From the beginning, it's been my estimate that this would go until June, but not longer than June, and that's for a variety of reasons. But I would think June, given how long carriers can deploy. We have the Ford is leaving today, and the H.W. Bush is on its way there. The Lincoln's been there a long time. There is a durability factor, though our Air Force has long-range strike. I don't think there'll be any targets left, Josh. Now, whether or not the Strait of Hormuz reopens, let me play for you the Secretary of General of NATO, Rutte, today. If you can find that clip, Harley, and play it for Josh.
Of the ballistic missiles, of the nuclear capability is severely degraded. When it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, I've been in contact with many allies. We all agree, of course, that strait has to open up again. And what I know is that allies are working together, discussing how to do that. What is the best way to do it? They are working on that collectively to find a way forward.
All right. Now, that's not saying yes, but it's not a no. Lindsey Graham, Mr. NATO, blew up yesterday at NATO's reluctance to help the United States clear the strait and keep them open. And I'm kind of there, too, and I've always been a big supporter of NATO. What do you think is the blowback at Britain and France as a result of their being afraid to be a part of this?
Well, look, it's certainly Trump has expressed, as yesterday he was letting some steam off when he was with the Irish leader about the British Prime Minister Starmer and his sort of hesitance to be engaged. Look, I think there's also a challenge on the U.S. front. We talked about the public wasn't quite as mobilized in terms of preparing for war as we've seen in other past interventions. There wasn't a whole lot of mobilization on the international front. Now, I remember all too well, Hugh, that even going back to the Iraq War and other international engagements, that the Europeans always seem to kind of carp from the sidelines. That's not entirely new, but there was sort of a lack of building that coalition of the willing, and I think it's being done a little bit on the fly as we speak. So I'm not sure it's a lack of wanting to engage as much as it is, about preparing their publics in their own countries about what the goals are and so on.
Here's my grievance, Josh. The coalition of the willing was 1991. We had the Brits in 2003 for Iraq. Afghanistan, Article 5 triggered. Everyone kind of pretended to play. The UAE had more real soldiers in real combat than Germany did in Afghanistan, but everyone pretended to play. We carried the load with the Brits. Now, however, Ukraine is in its fourth year. We're supplying Ukraine everything except manpower, and we did it before NATO started spending it. And now NATO isn't sending a minesweeper? A minesweeper? You get the last minute.
Yeah, look, I would hope that it would be as simple as some communication and better diplomacy that we could kind of coordinate more effectively, and that they are not trying to resist helping out in dealing with the threat that Iran poses very much to their own countries. In fact, terrorism is an even more pronounced threat. Iranian terrorism, Iranian-sponsored terrorism, is very, very real on the European home front. So, I mean, they understand, they should understand, these countries, the threat that Iran has posed and does pose. And I would hope that it would be more of an issue of diplomacy rather than an issue of their reading of the security threat.
We can only hope. Josh Kraushaar, thank you. Qatar, normally known as the in-between people, have just thrown all the Iranians out of their country. So good for Qatar. Senator Tom Cotton was on Fox News talking about the biggest of all pictures, all right, the geopolitical picture, cut number 8.
Tonight. Today is a very important occasion. The Intelligence Committee typically only has one public hearing a year for our intelligence chiefs to speak to the American people. What we're going to hear today is that while the world is still a dangerous place, it's safer for America than it was a year ago, thanks to President Trump's leadership, the good work of the men and women at our intelligence agencies and our military and our Republican Congress. And second, that these agencies have undergone a lot of reforms in the last year to get back to their core mission of collecting intelligence that helps us protect our nation. And those two things are related. The reason why we've been successful in the intelligence space over the last year is because the agencies are getting back to those core missions. So it's a very important hearing for the American people to hear once a year from the chiefs of our intelligence agencies.
Right. That is the big news. That is the fact. The world is much safer. You, hearing this show right now, whether you're watching on the Salem News Channel, listening on one of my radio affiliates, no matter where you are safer today. Your children, your grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, they're all going to be safer today because of the last 19 days. Because a fanatical, theological extremist country ought never to have been allowed to get close to nukes. In 2003, W. Bush did not go into Iran. He wanted to make sure that they were actually intent on obtaining them. He received an erroneous report from his intelligence community in 2007, leaked to the New York Times, designed to preempt any action he might have taken by saying, they don't have a nuke program, no nuke program. Then it turns out they did, and the reaction of the Obama era, the appeasement era, was to give them $1.7 billion in cash on pallets, 2 big wide-body planes full of gold, dollar bills, all that cash. Cash money, as we say. And on top of that, billions and billions in sanctions relief. And what did they do? They built up their proxies in Hezbollah and Hamas. They built up the Houthis. They rebuilt their navy. They got missiles and missiles and more missiles in an attempt to deter the attack that was unleashed on Midnight Hammer. The reaction after Midnight Hammer, no, we're not going to pay any attention to this fellow Trump. We're not going to accept the invitation to really denuclearize, as did Ukraine, as did South Africa, as did Libya, formerly on the path to nuclear weapon countries, have abandoned that path. There's a playbook which you have to follow. They did not follow. They have obfuscated. They have cheated. And now reality has caught up with them. And the weak-kneed in the world, mostly in Europe, aren't doing anything. Those who are far away are watching and paying the price. China has already got its reserves in place, but they cannot like the way that the world is going with Donald Trump in the driver's seat. The transcript of my interview with Leader Thune is posted over at HughHewitt.com. You'll also find there the banner at the top for Food for the Poor. Don't forget that when you're reading about Leader Thune. And the fact that there's a deal to be had. The Democrats could just offer to reopen the government and pass the appropriation bill for DHS if they want to get off the SAVE Act. Sounds like that there's a deal there to be had. I don't know. Go and read it for yourself. Don't want to put words in the leader's mouth. Here are some Democrats. They're not distinguishing themselves in this debate, by the way, on the SAVE Act. Here is Amy Klobuchar, who wants to be the governor of Minnesota, cut number 15.
Their private voter data is sent to Homeland Security to go through some Elon Musk designed computer system. It's not what people want in this country right now. Thank you, Mr. President.
That's all fiction, of course. No data is going to go to a Department of Homeland Security database and an Elon. It's like science fiction that Amy Klobuchar doesn't have any argument to make against the SAVE Act. No Democrat does, because you ought to be a citizen to vote in federal elections, and you ought to have proof of ID. And you need ID all the time. All the time, everywhere, all the time. If you're old enough to vote, you're old enough to have a photo ID, and you ought to have it. And there's no excuse for the Democrats in this position. They like to cheat. Here's Patty Murray, cut number 16.
That is not the half of it. Just consider all the people who will face new challenges just to vote for no good reason. If you are a student who just moved to start college, Republicans will make it harder for you to vote. Because if this bill passes, you will need to show a photo ID and proof of citizenship in every single state. But a student ID won't count. Many tribal IDs also won't be enough under the new Republican restrictions.
You know what? Student IDs won't count. I'm not even sure that that's true, but they'll have a driver's license, Patty. They're going to be 18. Senator Murray, Senator Klobuchar are not the bottom of the barrel, though. Peter Welch, senator from Vermont, cut number 17.
The bill not only requires proof of citizenship, but also proof of residence in order to register. This could block even more voters from voting.
Proof of citizenship. Really? Proof of citizenship. Birth certificate, passport. It's not really hard to come. You can get a voter ID verified. The kind we all have now.
Residency. You've got to you proof of residency to vote in a state.
All you need is a water bill. Now, let me go and switch subjects on you over to the war. The Democrats have no arguments. The SAVE Act makes perfect sense. Remember that the Democrats want to cheat when it comes time to vote in this election. Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning, cut number 18.
I'm here with Israel's defense minister, our chief of staff, the head of the Mossad, the chief of Air Force, our senior commanders. In the past 24 hours, we knocked out 2 of the terrorist chieftains, the top terrorist chieftains of this tyranny. Our aircraft are hitting the terror operatives on the ground, in the crossroads, in the city squares. This is meant to enable the brave people of Iran to celebrate the Festival of Fire. So celebrate and Happy Nowruz. We're watching from above.
We're watching from above. You know who hears that? The Basij hears that. The IRGC hears that. There was a story today that the Israelis had so penetrated the Iranian security services, they knew what the backup place was. So if they blow up our headquarters, we're going to gather here at X, Y, and Z. Most of them sports stadiums, soccer fields. Then they blew them up after they gathered there. A lot of dead Basij, a lot of dead secret police right now. It's like the Gestapo of Iran's being wiped out. Here, Israeli ambassador to the United States, Leiter, talking with John Roberts on Fox earlier today, cut number 19.
UAE is a great ally, both the United States and Israel. As a matter of fact, what the Iranians are doing is actually moving all the Gulf countries closer to Israel. Look, Israel and the United States are now operating as allies of the most in the most intense way, and we know who our friends are. The U.S. knows who their friends are, and we're fighting shoulder to shoulder, wing to wing. The Europeans might want to learn how to be a true friend and ally. Sitting on the sidelines and letting us do the battle, really for the world. Israel and the United States right now are opening up the Straits of Hormuz for the entire world. And it's really a shame to see President Macron make the statements he did. I think history is going to judge our European friends very, very poorly.
Oh, that's a given. Oh, is that a given? Trey Yingst doing a great job, along with Lucas Tomlinson, deployed throughout the Middle East. Trey gave an update on the war a couple hours ago on Fox. Here is cut number 20.
John, good afternoon. I want to start with a statement crossing the wires just last hour from Iran's Supreme Leader Mustafa Khamenei, saying that criminals have to pay soon for his blood. And he is reportedly talking about the top official Ali Larijani, who was killed yesterday. We should note we've not yet seen any proof of life from the new supreme leader in Iran, and this statement is coming through Reuters via state media in Iran. It comes as we're tracking developments out of the Islamic Republic, where overnight the Israelis launched a precision strike to kill Ismail Khatib, Iran's intelligence minister, a man who was responsible in part for taking down the internet in Iran. You can see some file video of him here. He was also responsible for coordinating the sleeper cells of the Iranian regime around the world. He is the third top Iranian official in just 24 hours to be taken out, alongside the Basij commander Soleimani and Ali Larijani. These three were responsible in different ways for the crackdown on protesters earlier this year, and it does appear this is part of a shaping operation to lay the groundwork for Iranian civilians if they decide to take to the streets of their country once again. We're also tracking U.S. strikes, where U.S. Central Command says for the first time in this conflict they used multiple 5,000-pound deep penetrator bombs on hardened Iranian missile sites near the Strait of Hormuz. This map shows where those strikes took place, and again, they were going after the anti-ship missiles belonging to the Iranian regime that threaten that critical waterway. As these strikes are taking place, U.S. Central Command launching a variety of strikes alongside their Israeli counterparts, going after ballistic missile launching positions, command and control centers, and other locations that the Iranian regime thought they were able to hide from those American and Israeli planes. The Israelis also releasing some new video of their own showing a wave of strikes against critical Iranian infrastructure, as reports indicate that gas facilities were also targeted in the south of Iran today. This video shows the Basij forces that had set up checkpoints in the Iranian capital of Tehran. They are being, quote, hunted by the Israelis, again, trying to lay the groundwork if civilians there want to go to the streets. Now, John, tonight, the Israeli people are bracing for more incoming Iranian ballistic missile fire. The regime continues to launch cluster munitions at this country, overnight killing at least 2 people.
So I want you to remember, the Iranian regime is using inhuman weapons of war designed to kill civilians. The Israelis in the United States are targeting military targets and military people and secret police. Civilizational differences matter. Here is Benjamin Bental Blue, by the way. He was on my program on Mondays with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. He was on ABC News last night giving a summary of what it will take to reopen the strait. Cut number 1.
There's a lot of metrics that can be put behind that, whether that's the diminishing number of launchers that the Islamic Republic has or can repair, whether that's the rate of fire of its short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles and drones, whether that's the number of ships available both to its conventional Navy as well as to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, as well as to, real strikes delivered against the beating heart of its ballistic missile defense production and defense industrial base. So the regime has suffered blows due to against its military capability and capacity by the United States and Israel here. So there is a real defanging mission underway. But right now, the path to military victory for the Trump administration is likely not going to be on land. It's going to be on sea, or at sea, I should say. And that path goes through the Strait of Hormuz and in the Persian Gulf.
Speaking of the Strait, let's talk about that. What do you make of Iran's strategy right now and its ability to continue to strike multiple countries and keep control of the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, the regime is certainly widening the war, and this was something they telegraphed. They said that they would be trying to distribute the pain to the neighborhood, and that they said if they can export oil, no one can export oil. Ultimately, however, the regime has lost in the Strait of Hormuz before, not a decade ago, but actually 3 decades ago. Late in the Reagan administration, they tried to actually mine, they tried to actually target civilian tankers, and it paid a very heavy price for that. And that's actually what brought the U.S. into the region in a big way and led to the creation of CENTCOM in that part of the world. So if the Islamic Republic thinks it's going to draw on history to be able to punch back at America or America's partners in the region, well, it's going to have to look and learn from those lessons of history, which I'm sure, by the way, the U.S. has learned and currently seems to be eager to try to repeat and remind the Iranians of.
I want to also add one late-breaking headline. An Iranian missile did hit the city of Hebron today in Judea and Samaria, and 6 Palestinians were killed by the Iranian missile. Brings the death toll of Israelis to, I believe, 16. 6 Palestinian, 10 Jews, but it's 16 Israelis. Joined by Charles C.W. Cook of National Review. He is a contributor to the Editor's Podcast. He also has his own podcast, the Charles C.W. Cook Podcast. Charles, I had Noah on earlier. I gave him extra time because I thought you guys all ganged up on him in the Editors this week, although you were the most gentle of the 3. How do you just, not in that context, but just you, Charles C.W. Cook, how do you assess the war?
Well, I think it's quite difficult in that it's been a remarkable military success at the outset, and I am deeply impressed by the performance of the Department of Defense. And as I said on the Editors, I hope our adversaries are watching. I'm sure they are. Where I'm a little stymied here is I'm not quite sure what we're doing. It's not that I don't think there are all manner of good reasons to be there. There are. It's not that I am per se against this action. I'm certainly not. But the president has been all over the place when describing what the aims are here. And because there wasn't a debate, I'm just not quite sure how to judge it. I'm not sure how long he's going to stay. I'm not sure whether we're going to commit the resources we would need, for example, to reopen the Straits of Hormuz. So I find it quite difficult to judge, not because I think, I've seen some people who have derangement syndrome saying the US is losing. That's absolute nonsense. I'm just not sure how long we're going to stay and what we're doing. So I find it difficult to know.
I'm a bit like, I'm going to borrow from Antigone and butcher my Sophocles. You cannot tell how good the day has been until the evening comes. We won't know till it's over. But it sure looks pretty impressive to me, and I'm not worried about the Strait of Hormuz, even though the price of gas is up. Politically, I know that's a problem for a Republican if it remains up come the midterms, but this is much bigger than the midterms in my view. What do you make, and I think this is actually the untold story, this might break NATO. When Lindsey Graham and Hugh Hewitt and a bunch of old Reagan conservatives are saying, what in the world, they won't even send minesweepers? What is the purpose of NATO? Is it just to protect NATO? What's your reaction to that, Charles? That people are turning on NATO who have always been pro-NATO.
Yeah, well, I'm pro-NATO, but I'm also of the view that NATO is in effect American power. And so I don't get too hung up on the formal structure. I think that the United States is in effect playing the role that the British Empire played before 1945, back to about the Battle of Waterloo. and that is as the global hegemon with naval supremacy on which others rely. So I'm not sure it can break NATO in the sense that it's not going to break American hegemony, and Europe, whether it likes to admit it or not, is completely reliant, more reliant now than it has been for a while, on that supremacy. So I think it's more a matter for us. You know, are we getting tired of being taken for a ride? And I suppose in some sense the answer is yes, but on the other hand, Donald Trump has made this a big feature of both of his presidencies, to tell Europe to pay more and to put pressure on them. So I very much see this within the context of that existing tension.
You know, Charles, one of the memorable moments of my life, and it's long, it's 70 years old, is when after 9/11, W addresses Congress, and he looks up and Prime Minister Blair is there. He thanks him for being there. He says, "Thank you, friend." And that spoke volumes about the special relationship. Keir Starmer has trashed that in 2 weeks. Do you think the British public is in favor of that?
Well, here's what I think, Hugh, and I take no pleasure in saying this as somebody who was formerly British and whose family lives there. But the British, irrespective of Keir Starmer and the most recent examples, have rendered themselves through their own choices somewhat irrelevant. I mean, if you think back even just over a decade ago to when Barack Obama was considering going into Syria after the Libya adventure, the British Parliament voted against helping. And this was a big deal. This was reported in the United States as being a big deal. It had some impact, not definitive impact, but it had some impact on Barack Obama's decision not to go in. That wouldn't happen now. If the British Parliament had taken a vote ahead of this and said we're not going to help in Iran, it would not really have factored in very much to America's calculations. So although I am very sad about that, and although I am sad about the decline of the special relationship which has accompanied it, I think it's a lot less important than it used to be. I mean, look at the British inability, the British of all people, inability to send naval power around the world within, 2 weeks? They said they would need 2 weeks. When the Falklands were invaded in the early 1980s, Mrs. Thatcher sent hundreds of ships to the Falkland Islands within 48 hours. So the British have done this to themselves. I don't think that is a case for going into Iran or for this or that president, but the British have rendered themselves irrelevant such that it doesn't matter, unfortunately.
Well, now there is new NATO. There is Poland, there is Finland, there is Ukraine, which is a sort of de facto member of new NATO. And they are holding the line against one of the malign powers in the alliance of tyrants. I'm just curious if you think Britain can recover its mojo and whether or not France might recover. With new political leadership, they've only got 27 ships right now. They've got 7 submarines, one of which is at sea right now. They've got 2 aircraft carriers. I don't know how you send aircraft carriers out without an escort fleet that they haven't got. Can they get it back? Do they want it back?
Well, it's a huge question because they're going to have to, if they're going to get it back, acknowledge that there is more to life than welfare spending. And I'm really not being a moaning conservative when I say this. I am very much a fiscal conservative.
I agree.
But the British have now, for 10, 15 years, really since the end of the Blair years, ramped up welfare spending, raised taxes to pay for it, and let everything else go by the wayside. There is no dynamism in the British economy. There is no interest in the creation of wealth. There is no interest in the generation of great companies or great ideas, or frankly, great men in the way that there once was. And the same is true of defense. The British have given up on defense. They have allowed their defense capability to atrophy. So it won't just be one good prime minister or one new political party or one favorable election. Culturally, in their souls, the British are going to have to acknowledge that there is more to government than handing out money. And at the moment, they're just incapable of doing it. Again, I hate saying this. I hate this. I take no pleasure in it just because I moved country. I haven't left all those sentiments behind. I wish the British and their island well. But I don't see anything at the moment that suggests that there is an uprising against the status quo.
1 minute, Charles. Not the rise of Farage and a party to his right? Is that not the stirring of the embers?
It's the stirring of the embers, but you need a lot more than embers. You need a very, very large fire here. And Nigel Farage, although admirable in some ways, is still operating within the existing political structure. And he is, for example, quite bad on housing development because he understands that the people he need have all of their wealth tied up in their homes. You know, the real shift in British history in the recent years was Margaret Thatcher, who operated outside of all of that. And the results spoke for themselves. So I hope that it can happen again, but I'm not optimistic.
Charles, but you are honest, and I appreciate that candor. Charles C.W. Cook, listen to him on The Editors, read him in National Review, listen to his podcast, Charles C.W. Cook. Sarah C. Bedford is a senior investigations editor at the Washington Examiner, and she covers the Hill like few people. Sarah, what do you think the end game is going to be for the SAVE Act and the DHS shutdown?
Well, it'd be great if those two things could sort of get done together, right? And you finally have enough pressure on Senate leadership to bring the SAVE Act to the floor, have a real debate about it. And you know what people like Senator Mike Lee and other big supporters of the SAVE Act wanted all along was to have to force Democrats to defend their opposition to the SAVE Act, which is like full of 80-20 proposals, right? Voter ID, proof of citizenship to register to vote. Those are things that most Americans support. And so Senator Lee and others who wanted to force, a talking filibuster, and we've talked about before how that's maybe not the most realistic way to try to overcome the 60-vote threshold, but the real 30,000-foot view of the goal of all of that was to try to force Democrats to say why they're against proposals that are so popular. And finally, it looks like Republicans are going to get that chance with Thune bringing the bill to the floor, even if it doesn't end up having the votes to pass.
Spartacus is up right now, Cory Booker, and he's saying crazy stuff. Patty Murray has said, you can't use your student ID anymore. I don't even know if that's true, but it's not really consequential to me. We've had Amy Klobuchar saying that Elon Musk is setting up a data center at DHS to take, they're saying crazy things. Do you think those crazy things will hurt them in the fall?
Well, it depends on how much Republicans are willing to push on the SAVE Act. I mean, so far it seems like not that much. It's only in the past few weeks that you've seen momentum really build behind the SAVE Act. But if you go point by point through most of the Democrats' objections to the Save America Act, and we've done that at the Washington Examiner, most of them don't stand up to scrutiny. This idea that married women, for example, won't be able to register to vote if they've had their name changed legally. That's just not the case. And so, Democrats don't really have a cohesive argument against the SAVE Act. And that's what Republicans were sort of banking on, why they wanted these open conversations on the floor of the U.S. Congress, because it's so difficult for Democrats to hold the line against something that's so popular.
Democrats want to cheat. And it comes down to that. They want to cheat in a few places where it makes a big difference, and a few hundred votes mean an election. That some elections do not feature cheating does not mean that cheating does not occur in some elections. Let me switch topics to the war. I've been covering it top to bottom. I believe it's going very, very well, about as well as any war could go, in which you've suffered 14 casualties, 13 casualties among Americans, 10 Israelis, now 16, with 6 Palestinians killed this afternoon in the city of Hebron. Our allies in the Gulf nations are taking hits as well, but Iran is getting pummeled. What's your take on the war, Sarah Bedford?
Iran is, and it was interesting today. You had DNI Tulsi Gabbard, you had CIA Director John Ratcliffe, FBI Director Kash Patel on the Hill, and they faced a lot of questions about the threats from Iran. And what was really interesting to me is that to the extent that Democrats were able to, I don't know if land some successful blows is the right way to put it, but were able to sort of really press Ratcliffe and Gabbard in particular, it was really all about messaging related to the war, right? Because it's hard for Democrats at this stage to argue that the war has been unsuccessful in achieving its goals, or that it's a bad idea to make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. So all Democrats had to go off of were messaging critiques. You said this at one point, now you're saying this. Your opening remarks had a paragraph that you didn't end up reading out loud in the case of Gabbard. But again, those were just all sort of rhetorical critiques about the way that the Trump administration is talking about the war, and not really critiques of what the Trump administration is actually doing.
Sarah, I think the American media is overwhelmingly anti-war because they're anti-Trump, overwhelmingly. And they cannot bring themselves to report. This is going as well as any military operation in my life, and I've seen a lot of wars beginning with Grenada in 1983. I remember vaguely the end of Vietnam, but not really that well, and that was a disaster. But doesn't anyone on the left recognize the incredible, awesome ability of the American military?
Well, I think that's why you do see Democrats treading rather carefully, not necessarily going after the Trump administration directly, saying this is really bad. We don't want the Iranian people to be free. We definitely want, one of our biggest adversaries in the Middle East to have nuclear weapons. They are sort of, that's why you don't have a coherent message from Democrats. They're going after messaging and things like that, because again, like you said, it has so far been a successful mission.
I hope it remains that way. Sarah C. Bedford, follow her on X at Sarah C. Bedford. Thank you, Sarah. Coming right back, Mary Catherine Ham is next of Getting Hammered. Let me remind you, over at HughHewitt.com, there's a banner at the top, Give Living Water, that connects you to Food for the Poor. Or you can call 855-359-4673. If you're observing Lent, but not so well, maybe $5, $10, $50. $50 gets clean water to 2 children for a year in the highlands of Guatemala. Food for the Poor, not-for-profit Christian organization. Your tax-deductible contributions are welcome, and I thank you. Mary Catherine Ham joins me, host of the Getting Hammered podcast and Fox News contributor. Mary Catherine, you really hit Paul Ehrlich hard today. He was a villain, you said. We should have talked about Norman Borlaug, but let's just pause to dance on the grave a little bit. That guy was wrong about everything forever.
Well, wrong about everything and hurt people being wrong about it, and was never once sorry about how wrong he was. And I just think with people like Paul Ehrlich, I'm usually pretty nice unless you're an actual terrorist when you die, but like a lot of people made decisions based on this person's worldview that did not allow for the idea of human innovation at all. And a lot of people are sad because they made decisions based on that worldview. And that worldview was also used to bully a bunch of people with government policy and environmental wacko stuff to make all of our lives worse. And so I don't want to let that kind of person with that kind of scholarship so easily into elite conventional wisdom anymore. Can we learn some lessons, please?
I appreciated it. Paul Ehrlich, for the Steelers fans, believed Malthus-like that the world was overpopulated and was going to run out of resources. Right. Wrong. Then you and Vic spent a lot of time on the Oscars. They only reached 17.9 million people. That's less than a presidential debate because people would rather get their politics from people who are really in politics as opposed to the movies. And the only movie I saw was Marty Supreme. I think they're dead. I think the Oscars are dead, Mary Catherine. You may be the person who watched them.
I didn't even watch them. I was just reporting what I saw the next day.
Okay, I got the impression that you had watched them. I said, my gosh, I did not think. Let's talk about something important. Let's talk about the Iranian women's soccer team. Okay. They're being forced back because the terrorists have taken their families hostage. No one except you and Vic have paid attention to this.
I know, and I wish people would. I was saying at the Oscars, perhaps someone could wear a pin for them. That's an ongoing crisis with specific women involved that I'm sure in Hollywood, allege that they care deeply about women under oppression while they pretend that we are all oppressed here in America under Donald Trump. It's shameful that no one talks about it. And it is a situation where I think some people don't understand when you live under a totalitarian regime like in Iran, if you are able to get out, your family is subject to torture, to kidnapping, to awful punishments, to disappearing. And so they are under tremendous familial pressure and filial pressure to go back home to spare them that. But by the way, they'll be in trouble as soon as they get back home. It's a really awful situation, and I'm praying for them and praying that the Iranian people will soon be in a different position.
Well, the one thing I think our government could do, and I hope Secretary of State Rubio does, is mark the names of the women who defected and then are coming back and say very clearly the Iranian regime, when you fall, the people who are in charge of these girls, these women, and their families will be marked and will be found, and if you mistreat them, you will be prosecuted and hung by the neck until dead, just like Nuremberg. That's all we can do, right? We could do that.
We could do that. And the nice thing about the threat credibility of Donald Trump is that people might actually believe it. So.
Oh, yes. Now, Mary Catherine, I began the show talking on Noah. I want to end it by asking you. I think we're winning. I think we're winning big. I don't see that point of view reflected anywhere in the media. And I mean, really winning big, big, big. What do you think?
No, I think that the media has trouble covering military conflict. They don't like American might and military being used for basically any ends. So they don't want to cover tactical and operational victories as victories. Instead, they just focus on, well, there's risk. Well, we don't know. All that is true. There are always risks in conflict of this kind, but they're not dealing with or contextualizing any of this for people who'd actually like to understand it and how things are going on the ground or in the air, which is a pretty astounding victory on many fronts, including the continuing amazing intel from Israel that allows the striking of specific targets, which, by the way, minimizes civilian targets or civilian casualties. And we end up taking out large parts of their higher ups, which is what can inspire people to actually come out of their house. You have Bibi Netanyahu telling the Iranian people, we're watching from the skies for you. I mean, that's something else.
Yeah, what I would love to see. You know my daughter. You know her husband is a flyboy who now sails ships. He's been in and out of the war. He's not in the war right now. He's in the far side of the world. But I wish that we would celebrate these men and women in the fight. They're such extraordinary professionals. And I think you're the one who said, please make a friend in the military. Was that you? Please make a friend in the military?
Yes.
Please make a friend. We have no idea what they're doing. It's extraordinary.
No, it's shameful that the press is so bad at this. The surf and turf was another great example of, like, y'all don't know anyone you can call who's been in the military who could tell you about this. I wish they did. I wish that more civilians knew more military folks. It is the beauty. We have this beautiful volunteer force full of these amazing families who put so much on the line, and getting to know them will help you understand their lives and what they sacrifice for us. And the press is foremost in needing to do that. By the way, that's why I work with the Travis Manion Foundation, because we make a lot of connections between civilian life and military life.
And right now, the civilians ought to be thinking about the military family next door and asking, especially if their wife or husband is deployed, can we give you a ride to school? Can we give you a meal? Let me close by doubling back to what you began with, St. Patrick's Day. Mary Catherine Ham is not Irish. This is a shock to everyone. She's English and she's completely Protestant. But your dad made a shamrock for you. And
He did.
I want every dad to know that story. Tell that story.
So I was between 5 and 7 probably, and I remember being a little panicked in the morning of St. Patrick's Day because I realized I didn't have anything green on and couldn't find anything. And my dad found somewhere a piece of felt in the house and hand cut this beautiful little shamrock, and we pinned it on my shirt. And I saved it for years. I probably could still find it somewhere around here, but it's just this little creative knickknack from when I was a child, where my dad quickly solved a problem. And at 6 years old, I was like, wow. How amazing is that? And I still think it's amazing, and I appreciate it.
Well, it's been 35 years, and you're remembering what your dad did on St. Patrick's Day is a message to dads that everything they do every day matters. That's actually what I took away from that, Mary Catherine Ham. Every day, what a dad does matters.
It does, and there's nothing like having a good dad, and I have one, so I'm very thankful.
Well said, and a well-produced episode. The new Getting Hammered dropped. I will talk about corned beef and cabbage in the Filipinos tomorrow with Vic Mattis. That was weird.
Sounds good.
But, I know, we'll do that tomorrow. Mary Catherine Ham, follow her on X at MK Hammer. Getting Hammered on your like and subscribe playlist. It's back. It's weekly. Great fun. Let me close today's program with a little bit of what we began the program with. Bibi Netanyahu talking about what they've done to the Iranians. Cut number 18.
I'm here with Israel's defense minister, our chief of staff, the head of the Mossad, the chief of Air Force, our senior commanders. In the past 24 hours, we knocked out 2 of the terrorist chieftains, the top terrorist chieftains of this tyranny. Our aircraft are hitting the terror operatives on the ground, in the crossroads, in the city squares. This is meant to enable the brave people of Iran to celebrate the Festival of Fire. So celebrate and Happy Nowruz.
I'm very, very happy that Netanyahu is the prime minister of Israel right now. And I always wake up, first thing I check is Times of Israel in the morning to find out who the Mossad targeted and the IDF killed off the night before, don't really want to be in the leadership of Iran right now. Now, don't forget, interest rates held steady today, andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. They are great sponsors of mine, fabulous sponsors of mine. Andrew wants me to pronounce IRRL correctly, but I'm not going to do that, Andrew. I'm just going to tell vets, if you want a real quick refinance, call andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. If you have an FHA and you want a real quick finance, 888-888-1172. But if you're a new home buyer, you've got to go, you got to move, you got to buy. You need the best rate out there, the best terms. You want to fix your credit. You want to find out how much you have to put down. Let Andrew and Todd walk you through it. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian are with Union Home Mortgage. They've been in the business a combined, 80 years. They've served thousands and thousands of you, including me, including my family, including Dwayne, including lots of people in the Salem Media Corporation. They'll serve you, and I mean serve. Not tell, serve. They listen and they deliver. 888-888-1172. I am in the Relief Factor studio. I did not go outside today. Why? Because it was 24 degrees. I dressed all up in my togs. I told you in hour number one. Ready to go. Opened the door and said, no, I don't think so. Went back inside. Began to watch Knights of the Seven Kingdom. That's something that Fetching Mrs. Hewitt won't watch, so when I'm batching it, normally I get my miles in, but not doing that wouldn't be prudent. But I did take my Relief Factor in hour number one. Feel great. Did my 5 on Monday and Tuesday. I can take Wednesday off. Relief Factor works. No minor aches and pain, nothing after a week off. So 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website, get the starter pack for $19.95 at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. And please don't forget, at the top of HughHewitt.com, 20, 30, 40 of you every day send in $50, $75, $100 to Food for the Poor. That's your Lenten offering. Thank you. Maybe you forgot it. That's why I saved it to the very end today. You can call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Give Living Water is the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. You've been meaning to do it. Some of you want to do more. Some of you can't do 50. You'll do 5. All of you, thank you. The widow's mite counts and generosity counts everywhere. You are really serving the lost and the least through Food for the Poor, and I thank you for it.